guarantees that when the 1st of April comes and much of this kicks in, that we're really going to be in a tough spot. But no, the Chancellor has been off to Davos and come back a new woman, and we're going to have a third runway at Heathrow Airport. Well, at least that's a decision, I suppose.
Rachel Reeves can't run away from the consequences of her actions anymore, and Farage is grilling her on air.
OK, let's say it's full steam ahead, third runway, it's necessary, unavoidable. Shut up, Ed Miliband, we're not listening, we're just going to do this. But in terms of that bringing growth, it's not going to happen in this Parliament, is it? It's going to take years.
Farage wrecks Rachel's delusional proposals that won't be bringing any growth while the economy crumbles.
All of what she's announced is undermined fundamentally by the things she's doing to kill growth, which is these sky-high taxes. You know, employers are leaving, investors are leaving, wealth creators are leaving, and these raft of new workers' rights, which is absolute poison.
Labour and Rachel Reeves are poisoning the country's economy, and the public is fuming with anger.
This government is all about growth. Of course, there isn't any growth at all at the moment, and many would say that actually the national insurance rises, new employment legislation, the upping of the minimum wage pretty much guarantees that when the 1st of April comes and much of this kicks in, that we're really going to be in a tough spot. But no, the Chancellor has been off to Davos and come back a new woman, and we're going to have a third runway at Heathrow Airport.
Rachel Reeves is on her high horse of delusion, and Nigel Farage wrecks her idiotic policies in an instant.
But one of the things I found really interesting was, following on from Keir Starmer's speech a couple of weeks ago about AI and new technologies, Rachel Reeves had this to say about new tech today.
We are at the forefront of some of the most exciting developments in the world, like artificial intelligence and life sciences. We have opened up our planning system to build new infrastructure, like onshore wind farms or data centres driving the AI revolution.
After clobbering the country's growth rates, Starmer and Rachel Reeves are desperately looking to fix the mess they created.
This government says it's absolutely determined to build 1.5 million homes during the course of this Parliament. Interestingly, that was the similar target for the last Conservative government that was in, although I have to say, with housing, and we'll deal with it separately perhaps, but even if we do build 1.5 million homes, that won't even be enough for the number of legal migrants that come over the course of the next 5 years. But will growth return? Are these proposals bold enough?
One impossibly promise after another, Reeves gets exposed as a liar, and Starmer runs away from the real issues.
Interestingly, the third runway has been dividing political parties
for a long time.
For a long time. Boris Johnson was going to lie on the runway, and
then he went to Afghanistan or wherever it was when the vote happened.
Yeah, quite.
That's right.
And Zach Goldsmith called a by-election over it, and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, appears to be very opposed to it. And some would say, well, why not build some more infrastructure in the north of England,
all of that,
and not the south of England?
How pathetic and shameful is it that while the country burns, Labour's busy arguing about long-term runway plans?
OK, let's say it's full steam ahead, third runway, it's necessary, unavoidable. Shut up, Ed Miliband, we're not listening, we're just going to do this. But in terms of that bringing growth, it's not going to happen in this Parliament, is it? It's going to take years.
No, well, I mean, I think a decision needed to be made on Heathrow.
Fine.
And you're quite right.
The British economy is on the brink of collapse, and Rachel Reeves' stupid ideas do nothing to address that.
Is actually, everyone tells me, we as a country are brilliant.
Yeah, we are.
At producing fantastic minds in this sector. And we're very, very good on research, and that's where the university links are really powerful, and then they all leave and go somewhere else in the world.
Right.
So she's right to say this matters.
That's right. It matters, it's very crucial.
And it could bring growth within this Parliament.
It could, but the issue that we have is the city, the people who write the cheques to invest in this stuff, have been traditionally quite reluctant to do that.
Thanks to Rachel Reeves' gloomy nonsense, nobody's investing in the UK anymore, and our bright minds are leaving.
Here's the problem. Everyone I've spoken to on both sides of the pond says for this to work, and AI in particular, you need data centres, data banks, on a scale that it's difficult for us to really get our heads around. And that means electricity demand of just a massive level. It'll mean UK electricity consumption doubling in the next 15 years. And the problem they all say is our energy is too expensive.
How on earth will this idiot Starmer and the useless Reeves develop our AI industry when energy is too expensive?
Wind generation, 2.5%, 3% of the total. Nuclear bringing in about 9%. Imports from France bringing in a little bit. Gas consumption, 60%, right? And the estimate is that 70% of the gas we burn, which we need when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, 70% will be imported. So there's no way with our current model, I don't think, that we can get electricity prices to a level that's going to allow us to become an AI.
Rachel Reeves talks a big game, but it's completely impossible unless she abandons Labour's lunatic green energy programs. We can't run AI data centres on wind energy or solar farms. This just goes to show just how far out of touch Rachel Reeves is. On top of that, just how desperate she is. The UK's economy has gotten so terrible thanks to her mind-numbingly stupid decisions that Rachel is being forced to make U-turns and fix this mess or lose her job for good. The only hope she has to do that is to do something about the biggest crisis in Britain at the moment, immigration.
Now, the UK's population is set to rise to 72.5 million by mid-2032. That projection released today by the Office for National Statistics is driven almost entirely by net migration, with a 5 million increase within 10 years.
The immigration stats get worse by the day, and there are huge consequences that we'll have to bear. While Rachel Reeves strokes her own ego, pretending to be growing the economy, our population numbers soar through the skies at a rate with which our institutions simply cannot keep up. Nigel Farage shreds Labour's delusional fantasy land of multiculturalism with simple facts. The situation is much dire than you can imagine, and as a result, we're the ones getting crushed by it.
Well, remember that the population's increased by more than 10 million in the last 20 years. More than 10 million. And so this projection from the Office of National Statistics says another 5 million. And we're all supposed to just accept it, say nothing, don't complain, or we're nasty people. And what's worth remembering, there is a consensus in this building between both the Labour and the Conservative parties. Whatever they say at general elections, whatever promises they make, they're both more than prepared to accept this.
What Farage is pointing out is a dangerous trend and a total betrayal of British national interest. Starmer and his cronies have shamelessly opposed tougher measures against illegal immigration, and even now they're trying to gaslight the people into believing that it's somehow a positive thing. Farage exposes the whole lie about how we need the immigrants, and make no mistake, it's nothing more than a fraud by this government to excuse their failures. Starmer and Rachel Reeves made a ton of promises, but they've only managed to be dishonest and wreck the entire nation in the process.
This is diminishing the quality of life for virtually everybody in this country. Why do I say that? Well, just suppose the government does build 1.5 million homes. That won't even be enough to cope with the numbers coming in the next 5 years, let alone the shortfall that we have now. Have a think about GP services. New homes still being built everywhere, no new GP practices, waiting times for a doctor, beyond anything our parents and grandparents could ever even have dreamt of.
Even if we assume that this shambolic government isn't completely out of their mind and depth, still it would not be enough to match the delusions that Starmer is peddling. We simply do not have enough resources and infrastructure to integrate that many people. On top of that, Labour isn't competent whatsoever. Rachel Reeves knows as much about how to run an economy as a toddler does, and it shows. Pretty much every decision she has made has been a literal nightmare. What's more is that her new plan isn't any different.
The majority of those that are coming don't work. You know the argument for the last 20 years?
What's your evidence for that?
I'll give it you. Don't worry, Nigel, it's good for the economy because everybody comes in works. Of the last 3 million that entered the country from outside the European Union under the last Conservative governments, of the last 3 million, only 22% are working. So here's the real kicker. Not only is living our lives more difficult, it's directly making us poorer. There is no argument for continued mass migration, and yet I fear it's going to continue.
Importing millions of people would be one thing if it was only to fill the gaps of our workforce. But in what insane world does it make sense to allow entire families, knowing that they won't be contributing anything positive to our society? Most of them live off of welfare, and guess what? Those insane costs are being paid by our taxpayer money. Starmer is so out of his mind that he's housing these immigrants in luxury hotels and giving them a ton of benefits. It's as if this idiotic lot is rewarding illegal immigration instead of punishing it.
seriously at all. And what was really interesting in the general election, whenever Keir Starmer laid out his key 5 or 6 objectives, legal immigration was never one of them.
He won't set a cap. He says caps don't work, but they are expecting a white paper on net migration in coming weeks. They might get it right. These are projections based on current party policy. If they can tighten it even further, the figures might come down from where they are now.
There is no indication the Labour Party will change the barriers, the limits to legal migration, let alone what's coming across the English Channel. There's no indication they intend to do any of this at all.
Remember that huge promise Starmer made that pretty much won him the election? He said he would smash the gangs, but right now, the gangs are smashing him. That's all Starmer and Labour do anyway. They make huge promises and then miserably fail to deliver. It's the prime example of Starmerism that this country is suffering from. It's not just that he failed to lower immigration, it's the disgraceful betrayal that he's actually driving the number up. All the while, our economy is burning in the background and our lives are becoming more miserable by the day. Now, Rachel Reeves, after she has robbed us dry of her hard-earned money, thinks she's bringing growth.
We do not need low-skilled migration into Britain. Do we need some brilliant engineers to come in and help us with AI? Perhaps we do, although actually we have many of our own good ones who are currently leaving. The big kicker to all of this is you have to break the gap of welfare dependency. If you're on benefits, a big range of benefits, and you go to work and work for more than 16 hours a week, you lose your benefits and you're worse off. That's where the tax breaks need to come. That's where the change needs to come. And frankly, we're going to have to get tougher with those who choose unemployment as a long-term option.
What Britain really needs right now is a government that isn't stupid and sinister. Instead of prioritising the British public, Starmer is busy pushing his hidden socialist agenda, and it's backfiring in the most disastrous way imaginable. There's a huge issue with unemployment in the UK, not just because there aren't enough jobs and that Rachel Reeves is actively making businesses shut down, but because a lot of the people just don't want to work. We offer so many welfare benefits that there's no reason to work for most of them. Farage wants to change that. Starmer's headed in the exact opposite direction.
That when Reeves stood up and did her, Richard III, as I call her, did her speech today about the third runway, which she and Starmer have obviously worked out is a necessity, I think that it will show, and is beginning to show, irreparable splits within the Labour Party. David Miliband, Ed Miliband I should say, who you would think would be involved, Energy Secretary, Net Zero, nowhere to be seen. Sadiq Khan already has come out and said, I will resist this with all of my might. It will create air pollution, noise, and will not allow us to meet our climate change targets.
Labour fighting over Heathrow is entertaining but sad, shows they're clueless about what matters for the economy. Reeves worried about planning rules. She needs to wake up to reality and realise that she helped make this mess. We can already see how disunited the Labour Party is, with many of their own ministers threatening a rebellion. Same old story, new faces, same bad ideas. They're all stuck in the same mess and can't make a decision that helps Britain.
I think the whole third runway thing is only really interesting because of the rows that it's going to create and is already creating, and that is great entertainment for us. Is it interesting in terms of what it can do for our economy? Absolutely not. Look, Rachel Reeves today admitted that she was quite shocked by how crap planning policy is in our country, and I don't really know how she can be shocked. It just shows just how limited her circle of friends is, because
Rachel Reeves deserves a reward for finally realizing just how broken the planning policies are in this nation. Reeves noticing planning problems isn't news, it's obvious to everyone. But the very fact that she's shocked over it shows how out of touch she is. It's embarrassing. And Starmer saying he'll cut red tape? Don't believe it. He's a lefty lawyer, they love useless rules. Just more empty talk to trick us because Labour will never get rid of the nonsense regulations. It's part of who they are.
This would take the third runway, they reckon, 7 or 8 years to get through the planning stage. And today we have the ridiculous scenario of Starmer saying, I'm going to evoke Margaret Thatcher, I'm going to break down red tape. This man loves a bloody committee in a quango. This is just words. And I really think that the British people are fed up with words, Isabel. I think they can see through this stuff now. And I think all politicians need to take note, because I think people are just seriously fed up to the back teeth.
Trusting Rachel Reeves to pull this off, knowing how incompetent she is just a lack of common sense at this point. Labour expects us to wait for a decade while they get done planning this runaway, and meanwhile, our economy might enter a recession very soon. So much for promises. And the money it'll make? Zero. They know it deep down. Reeves being surprised by planning rules, and she thinks this runway will bring any real change is, again, proof of how clueless she is. These are the people running our money. No wonder we're broke.
Well, there are a bunch of other growth killers that she included in that speech. I mean, she said casually that she wants to actually increase immigration from certain categories of high-skilled individual. Well, we're all in, I think pretty much everybody is in favour of very, very specific high-skilled immigration. Any sensible country, any growing country wants to have the brightest and best. The problem is, at this point, nobody trusts their approach to immigration, and we've already got a come one, come all policy.
Is it not disgusting that Rachel Reeves can lie to us with a straight face? She keeps rambling on about growth, but we've seen none so far. On top of that, we'll likely never see this magical growth because Reeves doesn't know anything about economics. It's no wonder that she had to lie on her CV. That's right, this good-for-nothing chancellor is always busy getting exposed in scandals or wrecked for her brainless policies. There is no logical reason to believe that increased immigration will bring growth no matter how many runways Rachel wants to build. In the end, she's only running away from accountability.
They said something during the election, but they didn't have to say a lot. They've lied on tax, they've lied about the heating allowance, they're screwing farmers, I mean, it is, to me, there can't be a plan. Today he invokes Thatcher. When he got there, he removed the picture because she was a scourge on society, apparently. What do they actually think? What do they mean? There's no conviction and no plan, and I think it can only be a horror 4 years.
The public trusted the Labour Party, and now pretty much everyone regrets doing so, simply because of how dishonest they are. Rachel Reeves had a lot of chances to turn things around, or at the very least come clean with the public. But no, they continue to sell us lies, and now they're terrified of the furious backlash that's coming for them. At this rate, the future's looking like a miserable nightmare for all of us.
All of what she's announced is undermined fundamentally by the things she's doing to kill growth, which is these sky-high taxes. You know, employers are leaving, investors are leaving, wealth creators are leaving, and these raft of new workers' rights, which is absolute poison to growth. You know, billions of pounds worth of extra rights for workers is only going to put companies off employing more people.
Even if Rachel Reeves came up with a dozen plans that actually did work and weren't idiotic waste of time and money, it won't be enough because there's a deeper problem at the heart of it all. The endless tax raids and policy decisions that she has already made in these 6 months are beyond disastrous for the economy. Our country cannot thrive in these conditions, and she knows it. At this point, if Rachel Reeves has any sense, she'd listen to what Nigel Farage and Richard Tice are telling her.
It sounds just like some form of quangocracy. It really does.
Yeah.
And he was just completely out of touch with the reality of what's going on in the world. You've only got to look at today's newspapers. There's another 10,000 jobs under threat from a retail organisation that's right on the edge. You've got big supermarkets laying people off. I mean, the job numbers, let's just remember the job numbers in December were the worst month on record since before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Reeves is fiddling while Britain burns. Runways and long-term projects are irrelevant when the economy is collapsing now. All we're getting are empty words while businesses are going bust. The blunder budget is about to bite, and it's a train crash in slow motion. We're seeing record levels of unemployment and layoffs, and that's all thanks to Labour's anti-growth policies. They need to listen to the British public instead of their own delusional agendas. But of course, they're simply too insecure and arrogant to do that.
All of the crises has been caused by a combination of the great blunder budget of Rachel from accounts, which perpetuated the carnage that this government's been handed by the con-socialist conservative government, previous one, I'm afraid, and the levels of taxation and regulation. And now what you're seeing is basically Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves panicking.
Reeves's budget is a nightmare, making a bad situation worse. Taxes are too high and the restrictions on businesses are insane. What Labour is doing is practically economic suicide, and Heathrow is just a desperate obsession with irrelevant projects while the ship is sinking. Reeves is failing to deliver growth, and the delayed impact of her policies like national insurance hikes will be devastating. Layoffs and hiring freezes are just the beginning. It's a downward spiral, and they're accelerating it.
And she's going to get up at some point this morning, probably during Julie Hartley-Brewer's show, and she's going to convince us, or try to convince us, that she keeps saying the word growth. And if you keep saying it often enough, people will believe it. But there is nothing that Rachel Reeves is doing to promote growth in the economy that I can see. Can you?
Nothing at all. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Let's remember that many of the measures from that blunder budget have yet to actually take effect.
Reeves isn't just failing to promote growth, she's actively killing it. All she's doing is trying to gaslight us and herself in the most tone-deaf way possible. Businesses are already shutting down in fear of bankruptcy. The consequences are real, and they're happening now. Starmer can live in his socialist fantasy land all he wants, but if he doesn't get a grip soon, Labour will be done for.
Laying people off and not hiring people. What they should do is they should basically admit they got it badly wrong, scrap the whole blunder budget, and start again with a short-term budget. And they've got to, and the other great thing they can do is, of course, which they won't do, is scrap net zero. You do those two things and this will turn around very quickly. But they're obsessed with net zero.
Reeves is incapable of delivering growth. Her policies are counterproductive, actively destroying the economy. Remember the national insurance hike in April? The guillotine is about to fall. Businesses are already reacting, preparing for the worst. There's a disaster coming, and the only way out is to reverse course, scrap the budget, scrap the lunatic net zero. What we really need is a short-term budget along with radical action.
There is a massive problem with regulation, and huge swathes of it need to be literally just chucked in the bin. Don't tweak it, don't fiddle around the edges. You just got to scrap whole swathes of it that are a huge block for business. It's a regulator's paradise, and they regulate for regulation's sake. So yeah, there is a major crisis, but there's no way the Labour Party that love regulation, they love big statist, tick box type culture.
The UK is a regulator's paradise and a nightmare strangling business. Regulations are made just to appease the liberal elite, not for any practical benefit. Tinkering with regulations is pointless. They need to be eliminated because it's a regulatory culture that's the crisis. Labour loves regulation, and it is infested with dishonest and disgusting cronies. Deregulation? Forget about it. We're doomed to be strangled by red tape unless Rachel Reeves gets her head out of the woke sand.
You know, how much more of this kind of wrecking of the economy can the country stand before we are the laughing stock of the world?
We already are the laughing stock of the world, I regret to inform you and listeners and viewers, as people steal our jobs and our money, and as smart people leave the country. So that's already baked in. How long we can carry on like this financially before the markets rebel and say we're done, I don't know, but it is sometime within the lifetime of this parliament. We are heading towards going bust. We're heading towards bankruptcy. We need to be under no illusion about that.
Labour is disgustingly pro-regulation to their core, staffed by union officials, think tank wonks, and career bureaucrats. Starmer and his cronies don't have what it takes, nor the desire to tackle this issue. Rhetoric is cheap, but real action? Impossible. They're all part of the same problem, the same regulatory state that's crushing British enterprise and driving us to ruin. We just might end up going into a recession if this nonsense continues. The only way out is to hold them accountable, and that's something you can help out with by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.